The morning mist clung to the manicured gardens of Thornfield Manor like a whispered secret, but Detective Inspector Sarah Collins had no time for the estate's haunting beauty. She stood at the wrought iron gates, watching as the Royal Protection Command vehicles rolled up the cobblestone driveway in perfect formation. Today would change everything for the royal family, and she knew it. "Ma'am, we have confirmation," Sergeant Matthews approached with his radio crackling. "The search warrant has been approved by the High Court. We're authorized to proceed with the full investigation." Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. 3 months of careful investigation had led to this moment. The missing crown jewels of Etheria, priceless artifacts that had belonged to the royal family for over 4 centuries, had vanished from the Tower of London's most secure vault. The theft had sent shockwaves through the monarchy and threatened to destabilize the entire kingdom's faith in their ancient institutions. Lady Camilla Pemberton, the Queen's own cousin and trusted confidant, had been above suspicion until yesterday. The breakthrough came when forensic accountants discovered irregular financial transactions linked to offshore accounts. Money had been moving in patterns that suggested something far more sinister than simple tax avoidance. The amounts were staggering, enough to buy silence, forge documents, and orchestrate the most audacious heist in British history. "Remember, we're dealing with someone who has lived her entire life in the highest circles of power," Sarah reminded her team as they gathered at the estate's entrance. "Lady Camilla isn't just wealthy, she's connected. Every piece of evidence we collect today needs to be absolutely bulletproof." The manor itself stood like a fortress against the grey English sky. Built in the 1800s, Thornfield had been in the Pemberton family for generations. Its Gothic towers and mullioned windows had witnessed centuries of secrets, but none quite like this. The estate sprawled across 300 acres of prime countryside, complete with stables, a private lake, and gardens that had been featured in architectural magazines worldwide. As the team approached the massive oak doors, Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. She had investigated countless cases in her 20-year career, from petty theft to international smuggling rings, but nothing had prepared her for this. The missing jewels weren't just valuable, they were symbols of the monarchy itself. The Etherian crown, the scepter of ages, and the legendary Starfire diamond represented 800 years of royal heritage. The doors opened before they could knock. Lady Camilla herself stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. At 62, she maintained the refined elegance that had made her a favorite at court functions. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her smile could have graced a magazine cover. But Sarah noticed the slight tremor in her hands and the tightness around her eyes that suggested sleepless nights. "Detective Inspector Collins, I presume," Camilla's voice carried the crisp accent of old money and private education. "I've been expecting you. Please, do come in. I assume you have the proper documentation?" Sarah handed over the search warrant, watching Camilla's face for any telltale signs of guilt or panic. Instead, she saw only a woman who had spent her life learning to mask her emotions behind a veneer of aristocratic composure. "We appreciate your cooperation, Lady Pemberton. This is a formal investigation into the theft of the crown jewels." "Of course it is," Camilla replied, her tone neutral. "Though I must say, I'm rather puzzled as to why you believe I might have any connection to such a dreadful crime. The very suggestion is quite extraordinary." As they entered the grand foyer, Sarah's team began their systematic search. The interior of Thornfield was exactly what she had expected: expensive artwork adorning silk-covered walls, Persian rugs that probably cost more than her annual salary, and furniture that belonged in a museum. Crystal chandeliers caught the morning light streaming through tall windows, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors. But Sarah had learned not to be intimidated by wealth. Growing up in a working-class family in Manchester, she had fought for every opportunity, every promotion, every moment of respect in a profession that still struggled with gender equality. Her success came from meticulous attention to detail and an unwavering commitment to justice, regardless of who might be involved. "Lady Pemberton, we need to discuss your whereabouts on the evening of September 15th, Sarah began, pulling out her notebook. "That was the night the security footage showed suspicious activity near the Tower of London, though the cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned at crucial moments." "September 15th? Camilla appeared to think carefully. That was a Tuesday, I believe. I was here at Thornfield, hosting a small dinner party for the Heritage Foundation. We were discussing fundraising for the restoration of medieval churches. Quite a noble cause, don't you think? Sarah made notes while studying Camilla's body language. The woman was composed, but there was something rehearsed about her responses. We'll need a list of your guests and any staff who can verify your presence throughout the evening. Naturally. My secretary, Mrs. Hartwell, can provide you with all the details. She's terribly efficient with such matters. Camilla gestured toward a side room where an older woman sat at an antique desk, apparently absorbed in correspondence. Meanwhile, Sarah's forensic team was beginning their methodical examination of the manor. In cases like this, evidence could be hidden anywhere, behind false walls, in concealed safes, or even buried on the grounds. The crown jewels weren't something that could be easily fenced or sold. They were too recognizable, too historically significant. If they were here, they would be hidden with extraordinary care. Detective Constable Williams appeared at Sarah's elbow, his expression urgent but controlled. "Ma'am, we've found something interesting in the library. You might want to have a look." The library was a book lover's dream, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes, first editions, and manuscripts that represented centuries of accumulated knowledge. But Williams led her to a modern computer setup tucked discreetly into an alcove. The screen showed what appeared to be sophisticated security monitoring software. "This isn't just a home security system," Williams explained, his voice low. "It's monitoring multiple locations across London. Look at these camera feeds, that's the Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, even Buckingham Palace. How does a private citizen gain access to these kinds of surveillance networks?" Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was either evidence of incredible guilt or proof of something even more complex. "Can we determine when this system was installed and who has access to it?" "Working on it now, ma'am." "But there's more. We found encrypted files that appear to contain building blueprints, security protocols, and staff schedules for multiple royal residences. This level of detailed information would be invaluable for planning any kind of operation." The implications were staggering. If Lady Camilla had indeed orchestrated the theft, she hadn't acted alone. This kind of intelligence gathering suggested a network of conspirators with access to the highest levels of royal security. But it also raised the possibility that she was being framed by someone with the resources and connections to plant such damning evidence. "Bag everything," Sarah ordered. "And I want our digital forensics team to examine every byte of data on these systems. If there's a trail, we're going to find it." As news of the raid began to leak to the media, Sarah could see reporters gathering beyond the estate gates. This case had captured the public imagination like nothing in recent memory. The crown jewels represented not just monetary value, but the very essence of British identity and tradition. Their theft struck at the heart of everything the monarchy represented. Back in the main hall, Lady Camilla maintained her composure even as teams of investigators methodically searched her home. She sat in a wingback chair, sipping tea from fine china, watching the proceedings with what appeared to be detached curiosity rather than concern. "Detective Inspector," she said during a quiet moment, "I hope you understand the position this puts me in. I've served the royal family faithfully for 40 years. My loyalty has never been questioned. The very idea that I would betray the trust is not just insulting, it's incomprehensible." Sarah studied the older woman's face, searching for cracks in her facade. "Money can be a powerful motivator, Lady Pemberton. Our financial investigators have uncovered some interesting patterns in your accounts." For the first time, Camilla's composure slipped slightly. A flash of something, fear, anger, or perhaps resignation, crossed her features before she regained control. "I'm sure there are explanations for whatever you think you've discovered. My financial affairs are complex, as you might imagine. I have investments, charitable contributions, and family trusts that span decades." "We'll certainly be examining all of those in detail," Sarah replied. "But right now, I'm more interested in why you would need to transfer nearly £2 million to accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands over the past 6 months. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Camilla set down her teacup with hands that were no longer quite steady. I believe I should contact my solicitor before we continue this conversation. That response told Sarah everything she needed to know. Innocent people asked questions, demanded explanations, or expressed outrage. They didn't immediately lawyer up unless they had something to hide. But she also knew that someone of Camilla's social position would have been taught from childhood never to speak to authorities without legal representation. The search continued throughout the morning, with teams examining every room, every piece of furniture, every potential hiding place. The estate's basement revealed a sophisticated climate-controlled storage area containing artwork, antiques, and collectibles worth millions. But, so far, no sign of the missing crown jewels. Sarah found herself standing in Camilla's private study, surrounded by family photographs that told the story of a life lived in privilege. Pictures showed Camilla at royal weddings, charity galas, and state dinners. She had been present at some of the most important moments in recent British history, always in the background but clearly trusted and valued. One photograph in particular caught Sarah's attention, Camilla standing next to the Queen during a ceremony at the Tower of London, both women smiling as they viewed the crown jewels in their secure display. The date stamp showed it had been taken just 6 months ago. Camilla would have had intimate knowledge of the security arrangements, the guard rotations, and the display mechanisms. But Sarah had learned not to jump to conclusions. Evidence was one thing, but understanding motive was equally important. Why would someone with Camilla's wealth and status risk everything for a crime that would inevitably lead back to her? The crown jewels couldn't be sold openly, they were too recognizable, too historically significant. Their theft would have to serve some other purpose. Her radio crackled with an update from the grounds team. "Ma'am, we found something in the stables. You need to see this immediately." The stables were located about 200 yards from the main house, connected by a gravel path lined with ancient oak trees. Camilla kept 4 horses, all thoroughbreds worth considerable sums themselves. But it wasn't the horses that had caught the team's attention. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in the tack room, investigators had discovered a sophisticated workshop equipped with tools for metalworking, gem cutting, and jewelry modification. The equipment was professional grade, the kind used by master craftsmen or, potentially, by criminals looking to alter stolen goods beyond recognition. "Look at this," Detective Williams pointed to a workbench covered with sketches and technical drawings. These appear to be detailed plans for disassembling the crown jewels, removing individual gems, and resetting them in different configurations. Someone spent considerable time planning how to make the most recognizable jewelry in the world completely unidentifiable. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. If these plans were legitimate, it suggested a level of premeditation that went far beyond simple theft. This was about destroying irreplaceable historical artifacts for financial gain. The cultural and historical loss would be devastating, regardless of the monetary value. But questions remained. The workshop was hidden, but not particularly well. Any thorough search would have discovered it eventually. Either the perpetrator was careless, or they wanted it to be found. Sarah had encountered both possibilities in her career, and she wasn't ready to make assumptions either way. As the first day of investigation drew to a close, Sarah's team had collected enough evidence to support an arrest warrant, but not enough to guarantee a conviction. Lady Camilla's solicitor had arrived and was demanding access to his client. The media presence outside the gates had grown to include international news crews, royal correspondents, and curious members of the public drawn by the spectacle. Standing in the fading afternoon light, Sarah reflected on everything they had discovered. The evidence was compelling but, somehow too neat, too convenient. In her experience, real criminals made mistakes, left loose ends, and created contradictions in their stories. Everything they had found at Thornfield seemed to point directly at Camilla's guilt with an almost mathematical precision. That bothered her more than she cared to admit. Either they were dealing with someone who wanted to be caught, or someone else was orchestrating events from behind the scenes. The real question wasn't whether Lady Camilla was involved, it was whether she was the mastermind or simply another victim in a much larger conspiracy. As darkness fell over the estate, Sarah knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, and possibly new suspects. The missing crown jewels were still out there somewhere, and, with each passing hour, the chances of recovering them intact grew smaller. But she also knew that she was onto something significant, something that would shake the very foundations of the monarchy and change the course of British history. The investigation was far from over. In fact, Sarah suspected it was just beginning. The interrogation room at Scotland Yard felt smaller than usual as Detective Inspector Sarah Collins reviewed her notes one final time. Lady Camilla Pemberton sat across the steel table, flanked by her high-powered legal team led by Sir Marcus Whitfield, one of London's most feared criminal barristers. The contrast between the sterile government building and the opulent estate they had searched the day before couldn't have been more stark. "Lady Pemberton," Sarah began, her voice measured and professional, "we've had our forensic accountants work through the night analyzing your financial records. Would you care to explain why you've received payments totaling £8 million from accounts registered in Monaco and Luxembourg over the past 12 months? Camilla's composure remained intact, but Sarah noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers pressed more firmly against the table's surface. "Detective Inspector, those payments represent legitimate business transactions. My family has extensive holdings throughout Europe, including property investments and art acquisitions. The amounts you mention are hardly unusual for someone in my position." Sir Marcus leaned forward, his silver hair catching the fluorescent lighting. "My client has been fully cooperative with this investigation. These fishing expeditions into her private financial affairs are becoming quite tiresome. Unless you have specific evidence linking Lady Pemberton to the alleged theft, I suggest we conclude this interview." Sarah smiled coldly. She had been waiting for this moment. "Actually, Sir Marcus, we do have something rather specific." She placed a photograph on the table, a high-resolution image captured by one of their forensic cameras during the estate search. "This was found in your client's private safe, hidden behind a false back panel that required considerable effort to locate." The photograph showed a single item that made everyone in the room freeze, a detailed wax impression of the key to the crown jewels vault, complete with measurements and annotations in what appeared to be Camilla's handwriting. The implications were undeniable: someone had planned the theft with meticulous precision, and they had needed access to the most secure key in the Tower of London to do it. "I've never seen that before in my life," Camilla said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. "Someone must have planted it. This is clearly an attempt to frame me for crimes I didn't commit." Sarah studied the older woman's face, watching for micro-expressions that might reveal the truth. "The wax impression shows tool marks consistent with the equipment we found in your stable workshop. Our laboratory analysis confirms that the wax composition matches samples taken from your estate's art restoration studio. Either you're the victim of an incredibly sophisticated frame-up, or you've been planning this theft for months." The silence in the room was deafening. Sir Marcus whispered urgently to his client, their conversation too quiet for Sarah to overhear. She used the moment to consider her next move. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. However, something still felt wrong about the entire scenario. In her experience, criminals who planned elaborate heists didn't usually leave such obvious trails. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Williams: "Critical development. Need you at the tower immediately. Don't bring the suspect." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "This interview is suspended. Lady Pemberton, you're free to go for now, but don't leave London. We'll be in touch very soon." 20 minutes later, Sarah arrived at the Tower of London to find the ancient fortress buzzing with activity. Police vehicles, forensic vans, and security personnel filled the courtyard where tourists usually gathered to hear stories of executions and royal intrigue. Today, the tower was the scene of a very real crime investigation. Detective Williams met her at the entrance to the jewel house, his expression grim but excited. "Ma'am, you need to see what we've discovered. The security footage from the night of the theft, we finally managed to recover the corrupted files." They made their way through the tower's ancient corridors, past displays of medieval weapons and armor that had witnessed centuries of British history. The jewel house, normally filled with tourists marveling at the crown jewels, was now a crime scene cordoned off with police tape and filled with technical equipment. The cyber crimes unit worked through the night, Williams explained as they approached the security office. Someone used sophisticated malware to corrupt the footage, but they didn't completely destroy it. We managed to reconstruct about 60% of the video from the backup servers. The security office was cramped but filled with state-of-the-art monitoring equipment. Multiple screens showed various angles of the tower's interior and exterior, but Williams directed her attention to a single monitor displaying grainy black and white footage. "Watch this," he said, starting the playback. This is from 11:47 p.m. on September 15th. The theft happened during the brief window when the guards changed shifts. Sarah watched as a figure in dark clothing moved through the corridors with obvious familiarity. The person knew exactly where to go, which cameras to avoid, and how to access the vault without triggering additional alarms. But what shocked her wasn't the expertise, it was the build and movement pattern of the thief. "That's not Lady Camilla," she said with certainty. "The person on this footage is younger, taller, and moves like someone with military or athletic training. Camilla is 62 years old and walks with a slight limp from a riding accident 15 years ago." Williams nodded grimly. "That's what we thought too. But watch this." He switched to another angle showing the thief's face partially visible in profile. Computer facial recognition suggests this could be Marcus Pemberton, Lady Camilla's nephew. The bone structure and facial proportions are a close match. Sarah felt the case shifting beneath her feet like quicksand. Marcus Pemberton was a former Royal Marine, discharged 5 years ago under circumstances that were never made entirely public. He had the skills, the physical capability, and, potentially the access through his aunt to plan and execute such a theft. "Where is Marcus now?" she asked, already reaching for her radio. "That's the problem," Williams replied. "He disappeared 3 days ago. His flat in Chelsea has been cleared out, his bank accounts emptied, and his passport is missing. Either he's fled the country, or someone wanted us to think he fled the country," Sarah finished the thought. "Pull everything we have on Marcus Pemberton. Military records, financial history, known associates. I want to know what kind of discharge he received and why." As Williams hurried away to coordinate the new investigation, Sarah remained in the security office, studying the footage repeatedly. Something about the thief's movements nagged at her. The person on screen moved with confidence and purpose, but there was something almost theatrical about their actions, as if they knew they were being recorded and wanted to ensure certain details were captured. Her phone rang, displaying the number for Dr. Elizabeth Hartley, the Royal Collection's chief curator and one of the world's leading experts on the crown jewels. Sarah had contacted her earlier to better understand exactly what had been stolen and why it might be targeted. "Detective Inspector Collins? I've completed my analysis of the missing pieces, and I'm afraid the situation is more serious than we initially thought." Sarah stepped outside into the tower's courtyard for better reception. "How so, Dr. Hartley?" "The items taken weren't chosen randomly. The Etherian crown, the Scepter of Ages, and the Starfire diamond represent the 3 most historically significant pieces in the collection. But, more importantly, they're the 3 items that would be nearly impossible to replicate convincingly. Whoever took them knew exactly what they were doing from a historical and gemological perspective." "I'm not sure I follow," Sarah admitted, watching tourists in the distance who had no idea they were witnessing one of the most significant criminal investigations in British history. "Detective Inspector, these aren't just valuable objects, they're irreplaceable links to 800 years of royal history. The Starfire diamond alone has been in the crown jewels since the time of Edward I. The craftsmanship, the historical provenance, the specific cut of the gems, all of it would require extraordinary expertise to duplicate or modify." Sarah felt another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "Are you suggesting that whoever stole them has access to master-level jewelry crafting skills?" "I'm suggesting that whoever stole them either plans to ransom them back to the crown, or they have connections to craftsmen capable of work that most people assume doesn't exist anymore. The kind of artisans who could theoretically modify these pieces while preserving their essential value." After ending the call, Sarah found herself looking at the Tower of London with new eyes. The ancient fortress had protected England's most precious treasures for nearly 1,000 years. Kings and queens had been imprisoned within its walls, executed in its courtyards, and crowned with the very jewels that were now missing. The weight of that history made the current crime feel like a personal violation of everything the tower represented. Detective Williams returned with a thick folder of documents and a troubled expression. "Ma'am, Marcus Pemberton's military record makes for interesting reading. He was discharged from the Royal Marines under what they call administrative circumstances, but the details are classified at a level that requires ministerial approval to access." "What do we know?" "He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, received commendations for bravery, and was being considered for promotion to sergeant when something happened. The official record just says he was administratively separated and given a substantial financial settlement that legally prevents him from discussing the circumstances of his discharge." Sarah frowned. Military cover-ups were notoriously difficult to penetrate, but they usually involved either criminal behavior or political embarrassment. "Any indication of what kind of skills he would have learned in the Marines?" "According to his training records, he specialized in infiltration, electronic surveillance, and explosive ordnance disposal. Basically, everything you'd need to plan and execute a sophisticated theft." But here's the interesting part: his discharge came just 3 months after he was assigned to a special unit providing security for royal events and ceremonies. The implications sent a chill down Sarah's spine. If Marcus had been involved in royal security, he would have had access to detailed information about protocols, schedules, and vulnerabilities. He might even have been inside the Tower of London in an official capacity, giving him first-hand knowledge of the security systems. "Get me a meeting with his commanding officer from that assignment," Sarah ordered. "And I want to know everything about this special unit, who else served in it, what their current status is, and whether anyone else has had unusual financial activity recently." As evening approached, Sarah returned to Scotland Yard to find her incident room buzzing with activity. The investigation had expanded dramatically as new connections emerged. Wall charts showed financial flows, timeline correlations, and relationship maps that painted a picture of complexity far beyond a simple theft. Detective Sergeant Amanda Foster approached with a computer printout, her expression urgent. "Ma'am, we've been analyzing the encrypted files from Lady Camilla's computer system. The technical team managed to crack the security, and what we found changes everything." Sarah took the printout, scanning columns of data that meant nothing to her untrained eye. "What am I looking at?" "Financial transactions, but not from Lady Camilla's accounts. These files contain detailed records of payments made to at least 12 different individuals over the past 2 years. The payments total nearly £50 million, and they're all connected to a company called Heritage Security Solutions." "Never heard of them." "Neither had we, until an hour ago." Heritage Security Solutions is a private military contractor that specializes in protecting high-value assets for wealthy individuals and corporations. Their client list is confidential, but we've confirmed they employ former Special Forces personnel, intelligence operatives, and security specialists from around the world. Sarah felt the case expanding beyond anything she had imagined. "Are you telling me we're dealing with professional thieves backed by a private army?" "It's worse than that," Foster continued. Heritage Security Solutions has contracts with 3 different royal estates, including maintenance of their security systems. They have legitimate access to exactly the kind of information that would be needed to plan the crown jewels theft. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but it wasn't one that Sarah liked. If a professional security company was involved, the theft could be part of something much larger: corporate espionage, political manipulation, or even international terrorism. The missing crown jewels might just be the beginning of a plan designed to destabilize the monarchy itself. Her phone rang again, this time showing the number for Chief Inspector Morrison, her supervisor. His voice was tense when she answered. "Collins, we've got a situation. The press has gotten hold of information about the Heritage Security connection. The Prime Minister's office is asking for hourly updates, and the Queen's private secretary has requested a personal briefing. This investigation just became a matter of national security." Sarah looked around the incident room at her team, all working with intense focus despite the growing pressure. "Sir, we need more resources. If this is as big as it appears, we're going to need help from counterintelligence and, possibly, the military.
Already arranged. You'll have a joint task force by morning, including specialists from MI5 and the Serious Fraud Office.
But, Collins, the political pressure on this case is going to be enormous. Every decision you make will be scrutinized at the highest levels of government.
After ending the call, Sarah stood at the window overlooking London's evening lights.
Somewhere in this city of 9 million people, the crown jewels were hidden.
The thieves might be watching the news coverage, celebrating their success, or planning their next move.
But, they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the determination of a working-class detective who refused to be intimidated by wealth, power, or political pressure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new suspects, and, possibly, new crimes. But, tonight, Sarah was beginning to understand the scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just about stolen jewelry, it was about an attack on the very symbols of British identity and tradition. And she was going to make sure that attack failed, no matter who was behind it or how powerful they thought they were.
The investigation had become personal.
Not just for Sarah, but for everyone who believed that some things were more valuable than money, more important than individual ambition, and worth fighting to protect. The crown jewels represented 800 years of history, and Sarah Collins was determined to bring them home. The Joint Task Force briefing room at Thames House had been transformed overnight into a command center that would have impressed military strategists. Digital displays showed real-time intelligence feeds, financial transaction maps, and surveillance footage from across London. Detective Inspector Sarah Collins stood before an audience that included some of the most experienced counterintelligence operatives in British security services. "Ladies and gentlemen," began Director James Blackwood from MI5, his voice carrying the authority of decades in intelligence work, "what began as a theft investigation has revealed what appears to be a coordinated attack on the Crown's most sacred symbols. We're not just dealing with criminals, we're potentially facing a threat to national security." Sarah reviewed her notes as Blackwood outlined the expanded investigation. In the past 24 hours, the case had grown beyond anything in her experience. Heritage Security Solutions had connections that reached into government contracts, international business, and even other European royal families.
The theft of the crown jewels might be just one part of a much larger operation.
Detective Inspector Collins will brief us on the latest developments, Blackwood continued, gesturing to Sarah. She stood, feeling the weight of responsibility as she addressed some of the most senior intelligence officers in the country. "We've made significant progress in understanding the scope of this operation," Sarah began, activating a large display screen. "Marcus Pemberton, Lady Camilla's nephew, has been identified as the likely physical perpetrator of the theft. However, evidence suggests he's working with a sophisticated network that includes professional security operatives, financial experts, and, possibly, international connections." The screen showed photographs of Marcus in his Royal Marines uniform, alongside more recent surveillance images taken outside various London locations. "Marcus disappeared 3 days ago, but we've been tracking his movements through credit card transactions, mobile phone data, and CCTV footage. What we've discovered raises serious concerns about the true scope of this operation." Agent Catherine Maxwell from the Serious Fraud Office leaned forward.
"What kind of concerns?"
"Marcus has been meeting regularly with representatives from at least 4 different private security companies, all of which have contracts with either royal estates or government facilities. These aren't random criminal contacts, they appear to be planning sessions involving people with legitimate access to sensitive locations."
Sarah clicked to the next slide, showing a complex web of financial connections.
"Moreover, the money trail leads through shell companies in 7 different countries, with ultimate funding sources that our analysts haven't been able to identify. Someone with significant resources has been financing this operation for at least 2 years." Director Blackwood studied the financial charts with obvious concern.
"Any indication of foreign government involvement?" "Not definitively, but we can't rule it out. The sophistication of the planning, the level of inside knowledge required, and the financial resources involved suggest this goes beyond ordinary criminal enterprise. We're dealing with people who understand how to exploit weaknesses in systems that most criminals would never even know existed." The briefing was interrupted by Sarah's mobile phone.
The caller ID showed Detective Williams, and his voice was urgent when she answered.
Ma'am, we've found Marcus Pemberton. You need to get to St. Bartholomew's Hospital immediately.
He's in intensive care, and the doctors say he may not survive the night.
Sarah felt her stomach drop. What happened? Apparent suicide attempt, but the circumstances are suspicious.
He was found in a hotel room in Bloomsbury with enough barbiturates in his system to kill 3 people. But there were signs of a struggle, and hotel security cameras show at least 2 other people entering and leaving his room around the time of the incident. I'll be there in 15 minutes, Sarah said, already gathering her papers. Secure the scene and don't let anyone near him except medical staff. The drive to St. Bartholomew's Hospital gave Sarah time to consider the implications. If Marcus had been silenced by his co-conspirators, it suggested they were willing to kill to protect their operation. It also meant the investigation was getting close to something that made powerful people very nervous. The hospital's intensive care unit was a maze of sterile corridors and beeping machines. Marcus Pemberton lay unconscious in a private room, surrounded by monitoring equipment and connected to a ventilator. At 34, he still had the lean build of a military professional, but his face was pale and drawn, making him look much older. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician, met Sarah outside the room. Detective Inspector, I need to be frank with you about his condition. The barbiturate levels in his system were nearly fatal, but what concerns me more are the other substances we found during blood work.
Other substances? Traces of a paralytic agent that's not available through normal medical channels.
Someone administered a drug that would have rendered him unable to move or speak while remaining fully conscious.
It's the kind of thing used in advanced interrogation techniques.
Sarah felt a chill run down her spine.
You're saying he was tortured?
I'm saying someone wanted information from him before he died. The timing of the barbiturate administration suggests they got what they wanted, then tried to make his death look like suicide. Through the room's window, Sarah watched the rise and fall of Marcus's chest, supported by mechanical ventilation. Whatever he knew about the crown jewels theft might die with him. But she also realized that his condition might provide an unexpected opportunity.
Doctor, what are his chances of recovery? Honestly? Very slim.
The combination of drugs has caused significant brain trauma.
Even if he survives, there may be permanent cognitive damage.
Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stop looking or more people will be hurt. The jewels are safe and will be returned when our terms are met. She screenshot the message immediately and forwarded it to the task force's cyber crimes unit for analysis. Whoever was behind this was watching the investigation closely enough to know about Marcus's condition within hours of its discovery. Detective Williams approached with a folder of documents from the hotel room.
Ma'am, we found these hidden in Marcus's luggage.
They appear to be detailed plans for operations against 3 other royal estates, including Windsor Castle and Sandringham House. Sarah scanned the documents, feeling her blood run cold. The crown jewels theft wasn't an isolated incident, it was the first phase of a comprehensive attack on the monarchy's most treasured possessions. The plan showed the same level of detailed preparation, including security schedules, architectural blueprints, and lists of high-value targets. There's something else, Williams continued. The hotel room was booked using a credit card registered to Heritage Security Solutions. Either they're incredibly careless, or they want us to know they're involved.
My guess is the latter.